Hey there. I hope you're well today. This is Raven Dana, and thank you for tuning in to Walking Between the Worlds. This is class 3 of our deep dive into autumn. So we're going to take a look today at a little bit more information regarding our shadow side. We're also going to take a look at guides, guardians, and protection, and the uninvited or unwanted guests that might show up. And what I mean by that is this tends to be a time of year when we entertain our fears a little more, when as things are slowing down and quieting and going to the shadow places in the fall, and there's Halloween and all the scary movies, we tend to be a little bit more on edge. And, not just because the movies are out and we're moving towards Halloween, but also because we're moving into the darkness, the light. We're having less hours of light. So that does affect how we think and feel, And it's one of the things that when we have less light, we are also more prone to consider the things that frighten us. It's the good news and the bad news. We get to look at some things that frighten us and accept them a little more and be less frightened. But we also tend to be a little bit more jittery. So sometimes we have that experience of feeling watched or feeling like a dream has been intruded upon by something or someone. And so this is one of the first things that we're going to take a look at today is how to clear out our space emotionally, physically, mentally, psychically. So one of the things that you can do to sort of clear yourself and put yourself more at ease is by drumming. So if you don't drum, that's perfectly fine if you don't have a drum, but you'd like to try some version of this practice. Get yourself a wooden spoon or a stick and something in your house that makes a pleasant enough drumming sound. It can be an old cast iron pot. It can be a plastic tub. It can be about anything. Be a kid for 5 minutes, run around your house with your stick or spoon and whack on things and see what makes a sound that's kind of pleasant to you, that you can close your eyes and go, yeah, I can listen to this for 10 minutes. And then you use the sound. If you don't have a drum, you can use the sound of whatever you come up with as a way to move energy out of your space. And here's how to do it. It's actually quite simple. If you sit quietly with the instrument on your lap or the spoon and pot on your lap, all you need to do is close your eyes and begin the drumming. So again, do a nice comfortable rhythm. That's me on my desktop. It's a little heartbeat like. This works for me. And in this rhythm, or listening to this drumming, you imagine the sound moving out from that central place, which is on your lap or in front of your body, and creating a circle around you. It is going out in all directions. So you see it and feel it. You imagine it vividly in your mind's eye, reaching out north, south, east, west, above you, below you, and resonating from the very center of you, within you. If you wish, you can give it a color. It can be white or silver, blue, it can be black, it can be any color that works for you, or no color. And you just want to keep that going for just a few minutes till you have that image of that sound creating a viable force field that's moving through you and around you, clearing, cleaning, cleansing anything that shouldn't be there. Any influence, any worry, any being. And when you're done, when it feels clear, you just stop. It doesn't take very long. and it's a good place to begin to clear yourself and your immediate environment. You can also use sacred geometry. You can use some kind of grid that you like. You can imagine, you can stand on it, you can print it and stand on it, and imagine pulling it up over your head and enveloping yourself in the geometry as it's creating a sphere around you. A sphere that is impenetrable to anything that would harm you, but that anything can pass out of, anything can leave that you don't want in there, but nothing can pass in without your permission. It's another good practice, especially for this time of year. It's also a good practice to get more deeply in touch with your guides and guardians. So, we are always in the between worlds, even when we're not aware of it, because 2/3 of our awareness is deep in our unconscious. Only a tiny bit of our awareness is conscious and above the level of our attention, right? So our consensual reality, our linear time, that the things that we tend to agree on to navigate reality, which we need, but those are the things that we've been taught to put our primary attention on. In fact, unfortunately, to put our attention on almost to the exclusion of our intuition and our dream space and our instincts. So we want to remedy that a little bit, and the fall is the perfect time to do that, because with the gates being thinner, with the darkness approaching, with the silence and the restfulness around us and within us, we can invite ourselves to listen more deeply and pay attention, bringing that information forth from the unconscious or just under the surface up to our attention, up to our awareness level, which is a good thing, because that way we can see the signs and signals that we would ordinarily miss or discard. Now, it's always nice to travel with a friend. So, if you're going to do some practices that help to deepen your intuition, and we'll do one in a moment, it's always good to travel with a companion. If you have a spirit animal that you can relate to, or the image of a guide or guardian that you can relate to, by all means use it. It's nice to have a picture. And for example, some people love bears. I like bears. So here are a couple of pictures that I think work really well for, genning up the image of bears and how they are protective beings. Now, if you don't have pictures, or there's plenty of ways to go about it. I have a tendency to collect, and in strange ways, little plastic animals find me. So I have had very powerful dreams, for example, with lions. So here's a little lion that I have that lives on my shelf. I have had a series of dreams and intuitions about elephants. So sometimes I get this feeling for, well, maybe it's an elephant. So look, you can find little plastic animals about anywhere. And here's another popular animal that people like as a guide or guardian, right? It's a lovely black panther. And of course you can do the between world kinds of things too. I also have this great little Jack Skellington, right? So anything that works for you works. And my recommendation for this practice would be to get an image or something that helps you to visualize strongly an ally, an animal or being that you feel connected to and that you feel protected by, and to go into the between directly and deliberately with the idea to retrieve information that's near the surface that is useful to you. And that information can be anything. It might be an opportunity that you might be missing. It might be a health issue that you're stepping over. It might be a warning about someone or something coming up that you don't want to miss. So here's the practice. We're going to do a very brief but useful guided imagery to retrieve information. So get comfortable. Won't take very long. Take about 2 minutes. You can do this during the day. I would suggest that you do it with a pen and paper in your hand, so that as soon as you come out of your reverie, you can write whatever you get. And I will encourage you to write whatever you get, not to try to interpret it or make sense of it, just to write down the words, the phrases, the feelings, the colors, whatever is there for you. And then you can go back to it later and see if it begins to form a picture or make deeper sense. Don't try to make it make sense. This is really important because the images as they come probably have a meaning that are unique to the situation. And if you try to impose a meaning on it, figure it out, use your mind rather than let your intuition guide you, you won't get the memo, okay? Or you'll misinterpret the memo. So sometimes this just takes practice in decoding how you speak to yourself. Okay, so call to mind a guide, a guardian, an animal, and close your eyes and take a breath. And as you breathe, let your body relax. Feel the sensation of breath and imagine that in front of you is a hallway. It's a lovely hallway filled with soft blue light. You can see patterns on the floor. You can see that the hallway curves slightly. And beside you is your ally, your friend, your guide, or your animal. And whatever feels best to you, they can walk beside you, before you, or behind you. But the two of you enter that hallway and begin to walk. You can hear your footsteps echo. And you can see a door at the end of the hall. Notice what it's made of. Notice any words, designs, or carvings. Feel the door. Place your palm flat on the door. And you'll notice now it begins to open. And you and your partner enter this space. It's an open space on which there is an old, beautifully carved table. The room is dim but not dark. The colors are soft and misty. You approach the table, and you know that what you need to know or find is there. You look down at the table. You notice what's on it. You notice how you feel in this space, and you notice how your ally moves around you in this space. You notice anything you can smell. You notice how you feel emotionally. And you notice any sensations in your body. And you make note again of anything that's lying on that table. It doesn't matter if you understand it. Just notice. Now, at the prompting of your ally, who turns to leave the room, waiting for you in the doorway, you turn and follow. You're led back down the short hallway. You hear the door to the open room shut behind you. You again notice the pattern in the floor. And you see the doorway standing open ahead of you, taking you back into the room in which you rest, into your body and into the moment. You step through and you sit down in your body, bringing back with you whatever you need You take a moment still with your eyes closed to remember thoughts, emotions, objects, sounds, sensations. And you breathe yourself all the way back, allowing your eyes to open, and you write down whatever you were present to. And you also thank your ally for traveling with you. Okay. I recommend that you do that practice every couple of days at least. It's a really good way to hone your skills, to begin decoding your own private symbol system, and to do a reality check about anything that you might not want in your environment, that you can start to discover ways to notice things before they become a problem. And some of it will be circumstances in your life that you may wish to avoid. Again, some of it may be opportunities that you would have not noticed but can then take advantage of. But also this process can give you a heads up about between world beings, or perhaps the restless dead, or perhaps a person in your waking life that doesn't suit you, that doesn't wish you well. So any of those kinds of energies that you want to eliminate, you can help yourself by discovering them in this place, and then you can do that brief drumming clearing. That's another application, of course, for that, is to get rid of something particular that you've noticed you don't want. All right, so it's a fine time to bring our attention to our intuition and to our precognition and our instinct, and pay attention to your dreams. This is a perfect time of year for reaching a deeper level of contact with the dream worlds and all the places that we travel when we're dreaming. So that clearing or cleaning of our psyche is particularly useful, especially here in this season, where we tend to be a little bit more edgy, a little bit more aware of that which frightens us. We're going to talk a little bit more now about shadow work part 2. When we work with the shadow, it helps us to recognize that whatever we deny within ourselves finds its way out, or we see it reflected back to us in another person. So, of course, autumn is a time of shadows. It's that liminal space where the exuberance of the summer begins to quiet down, and we slip into the shadows to move towards the bare bones of winter. So fall lets us linger in the shadows and play in that shadow world. The fallen leaves and the beauty of the fall lend itself to a certain kind of melancholy for many people, but a calm peacefulness, a peacefulness of letting go. So with that, one of the things that we tend to have some shadows around is the concept of death and dying. And it's useful, even though intellectually we know, yes, death gives way to life and it's natural and it's normal, but our culture, our society looks at death as failure, looks at death as something to be fought or avoided. And so that sets us up sometimes for issues, for problems. So I'm bringing this up not just because most of us have some shadow work to do around death and dying, but because we tend to avoid the feelings of grief and sadness. Or if we don't outright avoid them, we skate along the top of them. We don't let ourselves feel them for very long. We do the buck up and, be strong and move forward. And that is not a healthy place to be, right? That creates a whole side of ourselves that begins to do something with that information that isn't necessarily useful. And I'm going to give you a concrete example. My family comes from a long line of people who don't want to feel, weren't good at feeling for any length of time, sorrow and sadness. There was a lot of sorrow and sadness. I mean, my grandfather and my father were in wars, right? World War I, World War II. My grandfather was lost in in the war for a number of years, a year and a half actually, lost, meaning he was injured and in a hospital somewhere and he was missing in action and my grandmother didn't know where he was, right? A lot of sadness and suffering and fear in those years during World War I, World War II, all of that stuff, right? You get the point. So, in order to be somewhat functional, instead of being in a culture that allowed for grief and grieving, ours is more a culture that allows for stuffing it and shoving it aside and trying to marshal on, which has repercussions, right? There are things that happen in the psyche when we do that and that are not particularly useful. So one of the things that I learned from my family of origin was if I felt hurt or sad or I was grieving, a safer, better emotion would be anger, irritation. So there's a feeling of more power, of more being in control, less helplessness to feel irritated and angry rather than to feel sad and hurt or grieving. So this is something I had to unlearn. This is part of my shadow side, that I recognize and embrace that it's easier for me to get angry than to admit that I'm sad or that I'm hurt. So I need to pay attention, and I do pay attention to that. Though it took me a lot of years to really figure out what was going on, since I wasn't at the time working with anybody. I'm talking to myself in my own head. And so it took doing learning more about what I know and talking to other people to help me unhook from that. And still there are times when I will immediately become irritated by something and realize that what I'm feeling is scared, afraid of loss, or that I feel hurt. So I'm offering that to you as a way to look at yourself and to see what might you do that creates a distance between you and your shadow self. What might you do to embrace part of your shadow nature? One place that you can look is how you language yourself around shoulds and shouldn'ts. When you should on yourself, or when you shouldn't, I should do this, I should do that, there's a whole background network of judgments and expectations and rigidity that not only you hold yourself to whatever those standards are, but your tendency will be to hold other people to those standards as well. So you'll find yourself judgmental of others in much the same way that you judge yourself, and you might not even recognize it's happening. So take a look at the place where you apply shoulds and shouldn'ts in your life. It's a thread to follow to get down into some of your shadow stuff, your misrepresented parts of your awareness that you sweep under the rug. That when you're judging or you're angry, for example, it might actually be that you're feeling vulnerable. If you're calling somebody names, labeling them some way, you might take a look at what's really going on under the surface there. What is it that you're afraid of? Is it that you don't trust your own judgment? Is it that you feel vulnerable? What might be going on? And how can you embrace that part of you rather than let it act out sideways, right? That's what happens with our shadow self. When we don't accept and embrace how we feel and what we want and what we need, then it comes out in some way that becomes a hindrance in our lives, a way that we shoot ourselves in the foot. So here's a little quote. We have seasons when we flourish and seasons when the leaves fall from us, revealing our own bare bones. Given time, they grow again. If happiness is a skill, then sadness is a skill too. That's Catherine May. I love that. I think that's true. If happiness is a skill, then sadness is a skill too. Not that we should find and dwell in sadness, but that we ought to give ourselves permission to let it be, to be with sadness, to be with sorrow until it passes and lifts, right? To recognize that a lot of shoulds and shouldn'ts are road signs that we can take a look at from this perspective. It gives us freedom to act on preference when we're not busy making up rules about what we should and shouldn't do for ourselves and others, right? So preference, it might look the same. We might still get up and do the laundry, but we might do the laundry today because we feel like it, because we want to do it, because it's a preference to have clean underwear and socks, rather than drag ourselves, shooting on ourselves, making ourselves wrong because it hasn't been done or we've got to do it. You know, the world doesn't end if you rinse out a pair of underwear in the sink and wear them the next day. It doesn't. So I want you to take a look at places where your own rigidity is a road sign to something that you're hiding from yourself and others. It's a place to start embracing some of your own shadow. Okay, right. It's just a way to move from obligation, in a sense, to the pleasure of choosing what you wish to do out of preference. So again, especially in autumn, be with sadness, be with sorrow, be with grieving. Let some of those unexpressed things in your own life, events that you have swept under the rug, that when you think about them again, you become overwhelmed with sorrow and sadness. Now, some events, the sadness is never going to completely go. If someone has passed, you're going to still miss them. But there's a difference between that and having not given yourself enough time to grieve or be sad, not giving yourself enough time to be with the feeling itself. So then if you get triggered, it almost paralyzes you. So go ahead and see what's there for you. Give yourself an opportunity to sit with rather than deny. And anger is another one. Some people have a serious taboo against being angry and go the other way. They become a victim. They cry instead of expressing anger. So, it works both ways. Just take a look at what you do and what may have been passed down as a shadow in your own family line. Right. Again, when we deny those things, they seep out through the cracks. We become depressed, or we have health issues, right? So feel what you feel and allow it to move through you. Let it fall away like the leaves. Let it blow through you like the autumn wind. Take it on as a practice, right? Like I said, I come from a long line of sadness deniers, and it's taken me some work to come around to the expression of sadness and to let myself stay there rather than get distracted with fear or grief or with fear or anger or other things that normally, things that I've seen my family of origin do many, many times. So it's just a part of my shadow that I have learned to hold tenderly, and that's what I suggest for you. The shadow side is something that you want. Your shadow self is a part of you want to embrace and own and hold tenderly. Not make yourself wrong, but find that space where you can let it be so that it will let you be. Okay. Again, because we're heading into the fall season, I want to talk a little bit more about death and dying. There's a really wonderful resource. Her name is Caitlin Doherty. Caitlin Doherty is the author of a book called When Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. She is a funeral director. She is a revolutionary in her field. She is an advocate for natural burial and for natural death. In other words, instead of being removed to a room and dying alone in a hospital, she is an advocate for giving people back the experience of being at home with their loved ones, if that's what they choose, when they die. So it's another place to look, because we have so many rules and regulations about death, and it's such a setup for us not to experience death as a passing, but as a failure, or as the loss of a battle. We all die. We know we all die. Everything dies. The plants die. The animals we eat are dead. Our pets die, right? Cultures die. People die. We're going to die. I'm going to die. You're going to die. It's not a failure. It's just the next thing that happens at some point in our lives. It's not a mistake. It's not a failure. So take a look at revising your relationship to death. Most of us get pretty frightened when we think about friends and loved ones dying. And not that it's ever going to get easier in that sense, but that we can embrace death from a different perspective if we look it in the face, if we do a little reading, if we do a little investigating, if we get in touch with what it really is that happens to our bodies when we die. What might we want to do with our bodies when we're not living in them anymore? I mean, do you really want to be pumped full of chemicals and shoved in the ground where you're going to be essentially a mummified Hulk, right? Do you want that? Or would you rather be, wrapped in a blanket and buried under a tree? Like, what do you want? It's too late to think about when you're on your deathbed. For most people, by then, we've got some kind of weird thing written up on a piece of paper and, our loved ones are going to do whatever. So, again, this is a good season for just chipping away a little bit at whatever we have going on in the realm of death and dying. It's a good place for us to look. It's a good place for us to investigate. All right. There is a song that I'm going to recommend to you. It is called Aeroplane, actually, by Tim Minchin. Aeroplane. This is, again, a shadow song, a song for this time of year. It's great, and I highly recommend that you dial it up on YouTube and take a look at it. Oh, the one of the websites for Caitlin Doherty, by the way, that I would recommend that you go to www.orderofthegooddeath.com. Again, orderofthegooddeath.com. Of course, all one word. And you'll find lots of interesting things and resources. Anyway, just go take a look. Look, we carry those who we have loved with us when they cross, right? And sometimes we have unfinished business, and sometimes we don't know quite what to do with that. So using tools that help us work with our concept of death is good. Music is one of them. That's why I'm recommending this Tim Minchin song to you. Again, it's called Aeroplane. There's another song by Hosier. It's called In a Week. It's a very interesting positive look, calm, clear look at death. It's a beautiful, beautiful song, In a Week. So listen to that too. We don't do music enough. We don't avail ourselves of the healing and insight that comes from music nearly enough. So next week I'm actually going to pick a song and play it for you during class. I'm not sure which one yet. I have lots of choices. But that's something that I think is very beneficial and useful. All right, meantime, this week another thing that's happening is we have the harvest moon. So the harvest moon on September 29th. The harvest moon has great significance. It's a time of celebration. It's yet again a time of letting go. It reminds us of the cyclical nature of life. It's time to harvest whatever there is to be harvested, not just in our crops and in our trees, but inside ourselves. Many people use this time of year, especially Halloween, as the turning of the year, as the new year. Whatever is being harvested is harvested. We go into the dark space and prepare again for spring. Now, here are some things, harvest moon activities that I recommend to you. Moon bathing. If you've never done moon bathing, well, simple. You just go stand in the moonlight, raise your face to the moon, bring your palms up to the moon, and breathe in the light. Bathe in the moonlight. Feel the way the moonlight shifts you, changes you, enlightens you. Think about your ancestors and their ancestors and their ancestors all the way back. Think about how many people in your family line have stood under the same moon and felt that light and have known that light, have gazed up at the face of the moon together. It's a great way to connect with all your ancestors who have ever done that through time. So I highly recommend it. It's a practice I love to do, And especially at this time of year, you can call forth your ancestors, ask them to come, ask them to stand with you, and moonbathe. Counting your blessings is another great thing to do because it's harvest time. I mean, it's great to do any time, but to actually look at what you have harvested, right? To give thanks for things that you have accomplished, or things you've avoided, or things or people in your life, or your current state of health. So counting your blessings is a great harvest moon activity. Making art and making music. Again, expressing your feelings, your gratitude, your wonder, your desires in art and music. The fall is a lovely time to collect things, sticks and twigs and rocks and, leaves, of course, and to sit and make things. Even if you don't consider yourself to be a good artist, who cares? Be 5 years old, collect pretty stuff, and glue it on a page. It's a great way to bring yourself together into the season at this time of year, right? Take a nature walk with some people in the moonlight. That's another fun thing to do. Moon meditation, I'm going to do one and post it on Friday on the full moon. Harvest potluck, a bonfire, the usual, right? The huge harvest potluck, bonfire, celebrating with mead and ale. Now, this is a great time of year to break out the mead if you've never had mead. It's essentially wine made from honey, right? In fact, that's where the word honeymoon comes from. It's from giving the married couple enough mead, honey wine, to last them to the next moon, to last them for a month, right? Honeymoon. So there are plenty of things that I'd like you to think about, particularly moving into this time of the harvest moon, which is the 29th, and to give yourself some time and space to cultivate for yourself a harvest moon ritual, or a harvest moon feast if you're not going to do a ritual, a harvest moon gathering, a get-together, something that allows you to celebrate life and death, letting go and holding on, allows you to celebrate calling in your ancestors and reinforcing your allies and clearing out of your life that which does not work. All right, I hope you've enjoyed today's class. I will post a meditation that goes with this class later on today. And in the meantime, have a marvelous, marvelous moon. Whatever you do, right? Ritual, party, have a great time. And I'll see you next time. Bye now. Thanks for tuning in. This is Raven Dana, walking between the worlds.